Welcome to this explainer. I want you to picture a scenario right now. And honestly, this is probably going to act as the ultimate psychological mirror for a lot of us. It's 11 p.m., your room is perfectly quiet, your audio system is running flawlessly, the sound stage is completely transparent, the latency is at absolute zero, and the uptime is perfect. You should really just sit back, pour a drink, and let the music wash over you. But you don't. Instead, you know what happens. This single innocent little thought creeps into your mind. What if I just tweak this one setting? I mean, it's a tiny adjustment, right? Maybe a slight shift in the DSP, a minor bump to the subwoofer crossover, just a really quick edit to a config file. Fast forward to 3 a.m., and your entire system is completely broken. You're exhausted, you're frustrated, and the music stopped playing hours ago. Let's be honest, we have all been there. So what this all means is that we need a massive paradigm shift in how we approach our gear. You see, we often think that constantly optimizing is a sign of true dedication. But the reality we are exploring today is entirely different. Achieving system stability and then just leaving it alone is actually the ultimate form of engineering discipline. It is not a sign of laziness. True mastery is knowing exactly when to take your hands off the dials. To understand why we literally do this to ourselves, we have to look at our own psychology. If you dive into any audiophile forum, you will constantly see users asking, "Hey, am I the only one experiencing this? I get new equipment, I am totally blown away." And then it just sounds kind of mediocre. Well, this brilliantly illustrates the concept of habituation. Our brains are hardwired to get accustomed to our environment. Even the most breathtaking, high-end gear eventually just becomes your new normal. It loses its initial magic not because the gear degraded, but simply because our brains adapted. And this adaptation, it leads us right into a massive dopamine trap. Because when the music no longer gives us that fresh thrill, we actually stop listening to the music. And we start listening to the equipment. We hunt for flaws, we measure, we tweak. The tool itself basically becomes the hobby. In the community, this collective insanity is often jokingly but very accurately called audiophilia nervosa. The entire original purpose, which is enjoying the art, is completely lost to the mechanics of the machine. And honestly, the absurd complexity we willingly dive into is pretty staggering. Take a look at this audio quality evaluation pipeline from a recent academic paper on audio degradations. It tracks noise, digital clipping, and minute glitches down to the actual microsecond. Thanks to modern DSP, we now have the power to analyze our home setups with this level of clinical precision. But as one user on the Audio Science Review forum pointed out in a pretty great rant, who actually had the ability to obsess over a 1/8 octave 10 decibel null at 74 hertz 20 years ago. We are literally fixing things we couldn't even hear before simply because the software tells us they exist. At the end of the day, the math behind our madness comes down to the law of diminishing returns. There's a fantastic breakdown by Audio Resurgence that shows this perfectly. Think about that first jump from a cheap Bluetooth speaker to a $1,000 integrated amp and some decent stand mounts. That is a massive 50% perceptual gain in quality. It changes everything. But as you climb the ladder, that curve flattens out aggressively. Upgrading from a $6,000 DAC to a $40,000 unit might only yield maybe a 5% subjective gain in transparency. We end up spending 5 figures and countless sleepless nights chasing a microscopic fraction of performance. And you know what the ultimate irony of that financial chase is? Paul McGowan from PS Audio hit the nail on the head. He points out that people will drop tens of thousands of dollars on a new DAC for that tiny 5% gain, but completely ignore the room itself. The room is actually the most critical component of the whole setup. Every room has standing waves that muddy the bass, and parallel walls that create flutter echoes. But acoustic panels and bass traps just don't have sex appeal. You can't really brag about a fiberglass diffuser on a forum the same way you can about a glowing, high-end tube amplifier. So how do we actually fix the sound without just blindly buying more electronics? Well, McGowan outlines 2 approaches here. If you're lucky enough to have an empty room, you can use the room-first method, treating major issues like flutter echoes and bass buildup before bringing a single piece of gear inside. But for most of us working in regular living rooms, the setup-first method makes way more sense. You anchor your listening position and your speakers first. By simply managing the early reflections, the sound that bounces off the sidewalls and hits your ears within 20 milliseconds, you will do more for your stereo imaging and soundstage than any expensive new amplifier ever could. While we're on the subject of setup, we absolutely have to talk about the trap of thinking more is better. Arundel Sound points out in their minimalist philosophy that adding more speakers to a home theater doesn't automatically enhance immersion. Throwing 13 mediocre speakers into a room just creates a chaotic wall of noise. Think about it like this. A master artist doesn't use every single color on the palette for every stroke.
strategic placement of fewer high-quality speakers will dramatically outperform a multitude of average ones just scattered everywhere.
And that philosophy of minimalist quality really points us toward our ultimate solution. There's this anecdote I absolutely love from a review of the Cambridge Audio Evo 150. The reviewer noticed that children intuitively understood this all-in-one streaming amp because its little LCD screen displays the album art. To them, the music is coming from inside this box. It completely bypasses the pretense that you need this massive, complex stack of boutique gear to reach musical paradise. It's a beautiful return to what we can call audiophile innocence. Which brings us to the real core philosophy of our explainer today. Because the ultimate endgame of any setup isn't actually about achieving a perfectly flat frequency response on a graph. The true endgame is psychological comfort. It's reaching a state where your system is absolutely stable, your mind finally relaxes, and you stop evaluating the gear entirely. You are, at last, just tasting the music.
Now, to protect our systems and our sanity from our own obsessive tweaking habits, we need actionable rules. So here is a highly effective 3-step framework. Step 1. Define good enough before you even start. If you don't set a hard target benchmark for your noise floor or frequency response, you are never going to cross the finish line. Step 2. The 48-hour freeze. When you discover a new optimization, force a mandatory cooling off period. If it still feels absolutely critical in 2 days, do it, but usually the urge passes. Step 3. Separate the sandbox. If you love to tinker, build a separate test bench. Never, ever scratch your tweaking etch on your primary daily production or relaxation system.
And look, if you find that you simply cannot stop analyzing your gear, it might be time for what Reddit affectionately calls the audiophile detox. The strategy is hilarious, but it is highly effective. You literally box up your expensive system. For 1 entire month, force yourself to listen to music exclusively through a cheap, battered Bluetooth speaker. Or deliberately wire one of your speakers out of phase and move your chair completely out of the sweet spot. Once you forcibly reset your baseline like that, setting your good system back up will feel like a total revelation. You'll cure your habituation instantly. To put this all into perspective, let's look at Paul McGowan again. Despite owning a massive audio company and having access to endless gear, he operates on a very strict ratio. He spends 80% of his time simply sitting in his room with the lights down low, just enjoying his system. He only spends 20% of his time tweaking, testing new circuits, and measuring. If the guy actually building the equipment can commit to spending the vast majority of his time just existing with the music, well, so can we.
All of this leads us to one incredibly powerful final thought. We need to completely reframe how we view restraint in the space. Walking away from the dials is not giving up. It goes like this. An amateur changes things until they work. An expert changes things until they are stable. But a master knows exactly when to stop. Leaving a highly optimized, stable system entirely alone is, quite frankly, the highest level of discipline you can achieve in this hobby.
So the next time you sit down at 11 p.m., the room is perfectly quiet and that little voice whispers, "What if I just tweak this one setting?" I want you to stop and ask yourself one simple question. Are you listening to the music, or are you just listening to your system?